welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now, I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Who Tells a Tale, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. He was the kind of person who always had something to say. Not the kind of thing that just fills silence, but real news, important, juicy, surprising. And he loved to share it. Not because he wanted to help people, or because he felt it was his duty, but because he enjoyed the act itself. The moment when everyone leans in, when eyes widen and mouths go quiet. That was his moment. I get why people like watching roosters fight. It's exciting. Or why someone would take a pinch of snuff, some say it clears the head. But why someone would get such pleasure from spreading news, that I don't understand. And yet, I'm sure you've met people like that. Maybe even talk to one today. The storyteller, the real kind, isn't rare, but isn't common either. There are many of them, in all shapes and sizes. Some are better than others. Some know how to tell a story with style, others just throw it out there. It's a kind of talent, the kind that politicians need. You have to know when to drop the news fast, or when to build it up slowly. You have to wait for the right time, find the right words. Like I said, I don't get it. Why would someone feel good just because they told something they heard? I've wanted to ask them, many times. But I know they'd never admit it. They don't call themselves storytellers. That's the first rule. They never say who they are. But knowing them is useful. It helps us understand how people think, what makes them tick. And the story I'm going to tell you starts with one of them. It's not long. You'll read it fast. About 7 years ago, in the same city, there lived a man in his early 30s. Good-looking, smooth-talking, always ready for a chat. Polite, very polite. But his real talent? Spreading news. He was a master. He knew how to pick his audience, his moment, and his tone. He didn't just blurt things out like someone handing a coin to a beggar. No, sir. He paid attention to the situation. Say he heard that the government had resigned or was about to. Most people would just say it straight. Not him. He'd wait for the perfect moment. He'd walk into a room, sit down, maybe sip some coffee, and then like it had just come to him, he'd drop the news. And everyone would stop what they were doing. That was his secret. The timing. The silence before the words. Lorenzo da Costa had a way of delivering news, sometimes plain, sometimes spiced up just enough to make it more interesting. He'd walk into a room, greet everyone, and if there was someone known for meddling in politics, he'd use the silence that followed his entrance to drop a line like, "It seems the men." People around him would immediately ask, "What? What's going on?" Lorenzo, keeping his serious face, would say plainly, "The ministry has resigned." "Ah, when?" "Today." "Do you know who was called?" "Zotimo was called." "But why did the ministry fall?" "Oh, it was rotten," etc. Or he might say, They died the way they lived. Who? Lorenzo would adjust his cuffs and say casually, "The ministers." Now imagine he was talking about someone important arriving on the steamer Dolfo Thiers or the Prince of Bismarck. Lorenzo would walk in, silently greet everyone, and instead of simply saying, "The Prince of Bismarck arrived on today's steamer," or "Thiers came on the steamer," he would turn to one of the people in the room and ask, "Did the steamer arrive?" "It did," the person would reply. "Did Thiers come?" This was the moment Lorenzo loved most: the surprise, the curiosity, the excitement in the eyes of the listeners. That was the real joy of his job. It's true this pleasure was harmless, and perhaps even unique. Unfortunately, nothing beautiful comes without a flaw, and no joy is complete without some bitterness. What honey doesn't leave a taste of poison? Asked the poet from the young captive, and I believe none, not even the joy of a messenger. One day, Lorenzo da Costa learned this the hard way. It was 2 in the afternoon. There were few people at Paula Brito's shop, only 5. Lorenzo walked in, his face closed, like a man carrying some heavy news. He shook hands with 4 of the people there. The 5th only got a nod, because they didn't know each other. There was a brief moment of silence, which Luis da Costa used to pull out his handkerchief from his pocket and wipe his face. Then he looked around at everyone and said in a dry tone, "So, the Gouvea's niece ran away," he said, laughing. "What Gouveia?" one of the men present asked. "Major Gouveia," Luis da Costa explained. The people around them stayed very quiet, and glanced sideways at the 5th man in the group, who, in turn, was looking straight at Luis da Costa. "Major Gouveia from Cidade Nova?" the stranger asked the storyteller. "Yes, sir," the storyteller replied. A new and deeper silence fell over the group. Luis da Costa, thinking the silence was caused by the shock of the news he had just dropped, went on to describe the details of the girl's escape. He spoke of a love affair with an ensign, of the major's opposition to the marriage, of the poor lover's despair, whose hearts more powerful than duty had decided to jump over the obstacles. The silence was like in a tomb. The stranger listened carefully to Luis da Costa's story, calmly tapping a thick cane he held in his hand. When the messenger finished, the stranger asked him, "And when did this kidnapping happen?" "This morning." "Oh." "Between 8 and 9 o'clock. Do you know Major Gouveia?" "Only by name." "What kind of man do you think he is?" "I don't form any opinion about him." "I mentioned the story because of 2 things. First, the girl is very beautiful." "Do you know her?" "I saw her yesterday." "Oh." "Go on with the second reason." "The second reason is the cruelty of some men in stopping the heart of young people from following its path. The ensign involved, they tell me, is a decent young man, and the marriage, in my opinion, would have been excellent." "Why did the major want to stop it?" "The major had strong reasons," the stranger said quietly. "Oh, so you know him?" "I do." "I thought so." "And what kind of reasons were they?" "I am him." Luis da Costa froze. His face turned as still and pale as a corpse's. The other guests watched the 2 men in uneasy silence, unsure of what might come next. 5 minutes passed like that. Finally, Major Gouveia spoke again. I listened to your whole story, he said, and I must admit, I found it quite entertaining. Luis da Costa blinked, confused. My niece couldn't possibly have run away from my house today, the Major continued, because she's been in Juiz de Fora for the past 15 days. Luis da Costa's face turned pale yellow. That's why I could listen so calmly to the tale you just told, with all its twists and turns. If that story were true, it would certainly be shocking. After all, Lucia is very beautiful, and you know this because you saw her yesterday. Luis da Costa turned green. Still, the Major went on, the news might have spread somehow, and I'd like to clear this up. Please tell me who told it to you. Luis da Costa flushed, his face turning every color of the rainbow. Well? The Major asked after a short silence. Major, Luis said, his voice trembling, I couldn't have made up something like this. I have no reason to. Someone else told it to me, that's all. That's exactly what I want to know. I can't remember. Try to remember, the Major said gently. Luis closed his eyes and tried to think. But he heard so many things, and repeated even more. He just couldn't recall who had told him the story about the kidnapping. The other guests, sensing where this might lead, tried to laugh it off and change the subject. But the Major was not a man for jokes or small talk. He kept pressing Luis to tell him who had started the whole story. Oh, now I remember, Luis suddenly said. It was Pyers. What Pyers? A Pyers I barely know. Fine. Let's go talk to Pyers. But, Major. The Major was already on his feet, leaning on his thick cane, his face showing no room for argument. He waited for Luis to stand up too. The messenger had no choice but to copy the Major's gesture, though he still tried to protest. But, Major, sir. No buts, not even half a but. Come with me. We must clear this matter up today. Do you know where this Pyers lives? He lives in Praia Grande, but he has an office on Rua dos Pescadores. Then we'll go to the office. Luis da Costa said goodbye to the others and stepped out beside Major Gouveia. He offered the Major the sidewalk, as a sign of respect, and also offered him a cigar. The Major refused the cigar, quickened his pace, and the two men walked toward Rua dos Pescadores. Is Mr. Pyers in? The Major asked when they reached the office. He went to the Justice Department, the servant replied. Will he be gone long? I don't know. Luis da Costa looked at the Major as he heard these words. The Major, calm as ever, said, Then we'll go to the Justice Department. And off they went, walking fast toward Rua do Paseo. It was almost 3 in the afternoon, and Luis da Costa, who usually dined early, began to feel the sharp pains of hunger in his stomach. It was like a sad complaint from inside him. But it was impossible to escape the Major's grip. If Pyers had gone to Santos, the Major would probably drag him there before letting him eat. All hope was lost. They finally reached the Justice Department, out of breath like 2 bulls. The clerks were leaving for the day, and one of them gave them news of the elusive Pyers. He told them Pyers had left only 10 minutes earlier in a horse carriage. Let's go back to Rua dos Pescadores, said the Major, in a peaceful tone. But, sir. The major didn't answer. He simply offered his arm and pulled Luis da Costa along toward Rua dos Pescadores. Luis was furious. He was starting to understand how believable, even justified, a crime could seem. The urge to strangle the major felt completely natural. He remembered that just 8 days ago, as a juror, he had condemned a man to death. Now he felt horror at himself. But the major kept walking, with that fast, determined step that only majors seemed to have. And Luis da Costa followed, dragged behind like a boat on a leash. It was literally impossible for him to go on with the man. It was 3:05 when they finally reached Mr. Pyrrhus' office. They had the pleasure of finding the door shut in their faces. Major Gouveia seemed upset at first, but being a man of action, he quickly got over the disappointment. "No doubt," he said. "We'll go to Praia Grande." That's impossible," Luis da Costa cried out. "Not at all," the major calmly replied. "We have a boat, and it will cost us just 1 cruzado each. I'll pay for your trip." "But sir, at this hour, what of it? It's time for dinner," sighed Luis, his stomach speaking for him. "Then we'll have dinner first." From there, they went to a hotel and had dinner. The major's company was extremely unpleasant for the unlucky messenger. There was no way to get rid of him, so Luis did his best to behave. Besides, the soup and the first dish marked the beginning of a truce. When coffee and a good cigar came, Luis was ready to agree to anything his host wished. The major paid the bill, and they both left the hotel. They went straight to the ferry station in Niterói, got on the first boat that left, and crossed over to the imperial city. During the trip, Major Gouveia remained as quiet as ever. Luis, now in a better mood, tried 5 or 6 times to start a conversation, but all efforts were in vain. Still, he was eager to take the major to Mr. Pyrrhus' house, where everything could be cleared up. Mr. Pyrrhus lived on Rua da Praia. They went directly to his house. But if the travelers had dined, so had Mr. Pyrrhus. And since he had the habit of going to play Volterati at Dr. Oliveira's house in São Domingos, he had left 20 minutes earlier. The major heard this news with the philosophical calm he had been showing since 2 in the afternoon. He tilted his hat even farther to the side, and glancing sideways at Luis da Costa, he said, "Let's go to São Domingos." "Let's go to São Domingos," sighed Luis da Costa. They traveled by carriage, which somehow comforted the storyteller. At Dr. Oliveira's house, they had the unpleasant experience of knocking 5 times before someone finally answered the door. Eventually, someone came. "Is Mr. Pyrrhus here?" "Yes, sir, he is," said the boy. The 2 men breathed a sigh of relief. The boy opened the door to the living room, where the famous Pyrrhus L'introuvable soon appeared. He was a small, cheerful little man. He walked in on tiptoes, shook Luis da Costa's hand, and politely greeted Major Gouveia. "Please, have a seat." "Excuse me," said the major. "There's no need to sit. We need just a few words." Mr. Pyrrhus nodded and waited. Then the major turned to Luis da Costa and said, "You speak." Luis da Costa gathered all his courage and said, "Earlier today, while I was at Paulo Brito's bookstore, I told the story of the kidnapping of your niece, which you had told me just before noon. This gentleman here, Major Gouveia, says the story is a lie, because his niece has been in Juiz de Fora for 15 days now. Still, he wants to find out where this story came from, and asked me who told it to me first. I didn't hesitate. I told him it was you. That's why he decided to come looking for you. And since 2:30, that's all we've been doing. We've been trying to find you. Finally, we found you. As Luis da Costa spoke, Mr. Pyra's face showed every possible sign of shock and fear. An actor, a painter, or a sculptor could have spent hours studying the expressions that passed across his face. When the speech ended, there was silence. Mr. Pyers wanted to answer. He really did, but he had completely forgotten how to speak. Either he couldn't remember how to use his voice, or he didn't know what to say. So, 3 or 4 minutes passed like that. Major Vidigal cleared his throat, looking straight at Senhor Pyers. "In waiting for your instructions," he said, noticing the man hadn't spoken. "But what do you want from me?" Senhor Pyers stammered. "I want you to tell me who told you the news you passed on to this gentleman," the major replied. "Was it you who said my niece is beautiful?" "No, I didn't say that," Senhor Pyers quickly answered. "What I said was that I had heard she was beautiful." "You see?" the major said, turning to Luis da Costa. Luis da Costa, clearly uncomfortable, began to count the ceiling boards. The major then turned back to Senhor Pyers. "So, tell me, where did you hear this from?" "From a clerk at the Treasury Department." "Where does he live?" "In Katoombi." Again, the major looked at Luis da Costa, whose eyes had already finished counting the 22 ceiling boards, and were now carefully examining the buttons on his shirt cuff. "That's all," the major said. "You may go now." Luis da Costa didn't wait for a second invitation. He shook Senhor Pyers' hand, mumbled a quick apology, and left. Even after walking 30 paces away, he still felt as if he were stuck to the terrifying major. Just as he was about to leave the dock, a boat was about to set off. Luis da Costa ran as fast as he could and managed to catch it, though he lost his hat in the process. A poor coachman picked it up and put it on without hesitation. He was finally free. The 7th. Now alone, the major and Senhor Pyers remained. "Now," the major said, "I must ask you to accompany me to the home of that treasury clerk." "What's his name again?" "Bacaro Placido." "I'm at your service," the major continued. "I've already paid for the carriage." Senhor Pyers made a face, clearly annoyed. He muttered, "But I don't know if..." "If what?" "I don't know if I can go today." "You must go." "I believe he's an honest man," Senhor Pyers added. "He must be," the major said. "He's not young enough to have teenage daughters now, but he might someday. And he'll want to know if rumors like this are flying around." "I admit the situation is delicate," Senhor Pyers said. "Couldn't we perhaps..." "Perhaps what?" "Postpone it?" "Impossible." The morning sun cast long shadows over the dusty road as Major Gouvier rode in silence beside Senhor Pyers. The latter, a man of quiet habits and even quieter temper, now sat stiff in his seat, his fingers twitching slightly against his knee. He had bitten his lower lip hard enough to leave a faint red mark, and after a long pause, he finally nodded. "Very well," he said. "I'll go with you." He turned to the major, who sat waiting with the patience of a man who had already won the argument. Believe me, Major, Pyers added, only the unusual nature of this matter could make me return to the city. The Major gave a small bow, barely more than a tilt of his head. Pyers then went to say goodbye to the host of the house they had just left, and returned to join the relentless officer. The Major's face showed no emotion, only the calm certainty of a man who knew exactly what he wanted. The ride was just as quiet as the one before. Not a word passed between them. The Major barely moved, like a statue carved from stone, speaking not at all, and glancing at his companion only once in a while. Pyers, for his part, passed the time as best he could be, lighting one cigar after another, 7 in all, as if each puff could take him back to the card games he had left behind. At last, they arrived in Katumbi. This time, the Major's luck had changed. He found the lawyer, Bachelor Placido, at home. And that, in itself, was no small miracle. Bachelor Placido was a man who embodied his own name. Never had patience worn such a calm face. He was round, with a healthy pink glow to his cheeks, and moved with the ease of someone who had never been in a hurry in his life. Yet beneath that calm surface burned a quiet devotion to peace, like a fire banked beneath ash. He welcomed the 2 visitors with the warmth of a man who had nothing but time and goodwill to spare. Pyers explained the reason for their visit. "Yes," said the bachelor, "I did mention something about a possible abduction, but not exactly as you described it." He paused, adjusting his coat with a slow, deliberate motion. "What I said was that the niece of Major Gouveia had been seen spending time with a young lieutenant, and that their affection was strong enough that a plan might be in motion." The Major leaned forward slightly. "And who told you this, Bachelor?" he asked. "The artillery captain Soares," replied Placido. "Where does he live?" "Just over in Mataporcos." The Major nodded, satisfied. Then he turned to Pyers. "I thank you for your trouble," he said. "But I do not thank you for the exaggeration. You may go now. The carriage is ready to take you to the ferry station." Pyers did not wait for a second invitation. He rose, bowed, and took his leave. No sooner had he climbed into the carriage than he gave himself a few sharp punches to the chest, as if punishing his own foolishness. He muttered to himself, his words filled with regret and self-reproach, each one a quiet condemnation of his own judgment. The Bachelor Placido watched Major Gouveia leave, puzzled as to why the Major had stayed behind. It didn't take long for the Major to explain himself. As soon as Mr. Pyers stepped out of the room, the Major said, "Please come with me to Captain Soares' house." "Come with you?" the Bachelor exclaimed, more surprised than if his nose had fallen into his snuff handkerchief. "Yes, sir." "What do you plan to do?" "Oh, nothing that should alarm you. You understand this is about a niece, and a concerned uncle must find out where such a rumor began. I don't blame those who repeated it, but I must speak to the one who started it." The Bachelor refused at first. His calm nature gave him plenty of reasons to argue that going out at dusk to visit a place like Mataporco was pure nonsense. But the Major wouldn't listen. With his usual commanding tone, he didn't ask, he ordered the fat Bachelor around. "But you must admit it's far," the Bachelor pointed out. "Don't let that stop you," the Major replied. "Call a carriage, and I'll pay for it." Bachelor Placido scratched his ear, took 3 steps across the room, lifted his belly, and sat down again. "Well," the major asked after a long silence. "I've thought it over," the bachelor said. "It's better if we walk. I just had dinner and need to walk it off." "Let's go on foot." "Fine, I'm ready when you are." The bachelor dragged himself to his bedroom, while the major, hands behind his back, paced the room, thinking deeply, and now and then showing signs of impatience. It took the bachelor nearly 25 minutes to get himself ready, and when he finally came back, the major was about to ring the bell for help. "Ready?" "Ready. Whatty?" "Let's go. May God be with us." And off they went, heading toward Portuguese. The sun was already high in the sky when the figure of Bachelor Placido could be seen slowly making its way down the street. If a kite could walk, it would move just like him, light, awkward, and pulled by the wind. But Placido was anything but light. His weight alone made any quick movement impossible. Still, there was more to his slowness than just his body. He seemed to enjoy making the major wait, as if dragging his feet was a small revenge against the man's constant nagging. He didn't walk, it dragged himself. Every few steps he would stop, breathe heavily, and let out a loud sigh. Then, with visible effort, he would continue, moving forward at a painfully slow pace. This was no way to travel, and Major Gouveia knew it. With someone like Luis da Costa, the major could simply grab him by the arm and pull him along like a sack of flour. But not with Placido. No one could pull 8 Arabas of man with just one arm. The major scratched his head in frustration. If only a cart would come by, he thought. Then he could at least get the bachelor off his feet and onto something more useful than his own 2 legs. But it seemed like fate had conspired against him. The streets were empty, and the few tilburys that passed were either full or moving too fast. One finally came along at a slow pace, as if inviting a passenger, but the major knew better. He couldn't force Placido into it, not without a fight, and not without breaking a sweat. So they walked. Or rather, they crawled. And it was only at 8 o'clock in the evening when the two finally reached the house of Captain Soares. Placido exhaled deeply, as if he had just climbed a mountain. The major, meanwhile, clapped his hands together, signaling someone inside. A soft, syrupy voice called out from above. "Who is it?" "Is the captain home?" the major asked. "I don't know if he's left already," the voice replied. "I'll check." As the voice disappeared, the major wiped his forehead. He had seen enough of this day to know that nothing would go smoothly. He braced himself for whatever nonsense would come next. 8 long minutes passed before the voice returned. "And who should I say is here?" it asked, now with a tone of polite curiosity. "Tell him it's Bachelor Placido," the man himself quickly answered, eager to finally sit down on a sofa and rest his tired body. The voice disappeared again, and this time, only 2 minutes passed before it returned. "The bachelor may come up," it said. Up they went. Captain Soares was waiting in the living room. He greeted both men at the door, though his smile was warmer for Placido than for Gouveia. The major was known to him. Yes, but only as someone you greet with a tip of the hat, and nothing more. "Please have a seat," the captain said, motioning to the chairs. They sat. "What brings you to my house today?" the captain asked, folding his hands. Placido cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Captain, he began. "I regret to say that I repeated something you told me something about the niece of Major Gouveia." The captain shrugged, his smile as tight as a rope around a man's ankle. "I don't remember saying that." "What are you talking about?" The bachelor Placido leaned forward. "You told me the flirtation involving your niece, the niece of Major Gouveia, had become such common knowledge that people were already whispering about a plan to kidnap her." "Hold on." The captain raised a hand, his face softening just a little. "Now that I think of it, I might have said something like that, but not exactly what you just repeated." "Not exactly?" "No." "Then what did you say?" The captain scratched his chin. "What I said was, there was some vague rumor going around about your niece and a young officer. That's all. I never said anything about a kidnapping scheme. You must have misunderstood me, my friend Placido. I guess there's a bit of a difference," Placido admitted. "A bit," the major muttered, giving him a sharp glance from over his shoulder. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that feels heavier than words. Finally, Major Gouveia cleared his throat. "Gentlemen," he said, "I've been chasing the source of this rumor since 2 o'clock this afternoon. It's gotten smaller, yes, but still there's talk of a fling with a young officer, and that's enough to bother me." He turned to the captain. "Would you mind telling me who you heard this from?" "Not at all," the captain replied. "I heard it from Judge Lucas himself. He's a friend of mine." "Even better." "I just find it hard to believe he'd say something like that," the major said, rising from his chair. "Sir," the captain said, clearly taken aback. "Forgive me, Captain," the major said, lowering his voice and sitting back down. "But you must understand how upsetting it is to hear your name dragged through the mud because of something a friend said. I don't think he meant any harm," Captain Soares added. "From what I saw, he seemed almost sorry. After all, your niece is already engaged to someone else." "That's true." The major admitted Lucas wouldn't insult me on purpose. He probably heard it from someone else. "That's likely. But I still want to know where this nonsense started. Come with me to his house." "Now?" "It's necessary. But you know he lives in Rio Comprido, don't you?" "I do." "Well, take a carriage." Placido, the bachelor, nodded in agreement, then said his goodbyes to the 2 officers and left the room. The captain couldn't hide his irritation. "Couldn't we have done this later?" he asked as soon as the lawyer left the room. "No, sir," the major replied firmly. There was something in his tone, something commanding, that made it impossible to argue. The captain had no choice but to give in. They got ready quickly, climbed into a carriage, and headed toward Rio Comprido, where the judge lived. The judge was a tall, thin man with a kind heart, but he had one weakness. He hated being disturbed while playing backgammon. And right now, he was in the middle of a game with the parish priest's assistant. The assistant had been on a lucky streak, winning 5 games straight in less than an hour. The judge was clearly frustrated, though not in a literal sense. He was just sitting there, pipe in hand, while the priest's assistant smiled smugly. Then the servant boy came in to say that 2 men were waiting in the next room and wanted to speak with the judge. The judge nearly threw his dice at the boy's face. He stopped himself, barely, and instead let out a loud complaint about annoying people. It's probably some lawyer looking for papers or asking questions. I wish the devil would take them all. Come now, be patient, the assistant said, trying to calm him. Go see what they want. I'll wait here. Maybe this interruption will change your luck. You're all right, the judge said after a moment. Maybe it will. He stood up and walked to the other room. There, he was surprised to see two familiar faces. Captain Soares stood up with a smile and apologized for the interruption. Major Gouveia stood too, but he didn't smile. After the greetings, the captain explained why they had come. He reminded the judge of a story he had once heard that the major's niece was in love with someone. The judge remembered telling him, I mentioned before that my friend Gouveia's niece had flirted with a young officer, which I deeply regretted because she's getting married soon. But I never said there was a romance going on. The major couldn't hide a smile, realizing the rumor seemed to shrink the closer it got to the source. He was determined not to sleep until he found out where it had started. Very well, he said. Hearing this once isn't enough for me. I want to know who told you, so I can find the real origin of this false story. Who told me? Yes. It was you. Me? Yes, sir, last Saturday. That's impossible. Don't you remember? We were walking on Rua do Ouvidor and talking about. Oh, but that's not what I meant, the major interrupted. What I told you was completely different. I said I would punish my niece if she looked at any officer while she's getting ready to marry. Nothing else? Asked the captain. Nothing else at all. That's really strange, said the captain. The major said goodbye to the judge, walked the captain to Mataporcos, and went straight home, cursing himself and everyone else. When he walked in, he was already calmer. What comforted him was the thought that the rumor could have been much worse. Lying in bed, he thought again about what had happened, but now he was starting to laugh at how much trouble he had caused the gossipers. His final words before falling asleep were, "Whoever tells a tale adds a tale."
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.